Let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. So I've made a few Leaks and Rumors episodes previously on the Samsung Galaxy S9, so if you're interested in knowing more about the S9, definitely check out those videos. The link for those is also in the description. And I've also talked about Samsung's most innovative device yet, the Samsung Galaxy X, which is more than likely launching in 2018 as well. But what about the Samsung Galaxy Note 9, Samsung's third big device for 2018? Well, welcome to my Leaks and Rumors series. I'm Daniel, and in this series I cover everything you need to know when it comes to the design, the display, the camera, the specs, special features, storage options, release date, price, and so much more in terms of an unreleased device. Also, if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more Leaks and Rumors episodes like this one and more interesting tech videos. But for now, grab some popcorn or some nuts because this is going to be another one of those long but very interesting and exciting videos. Okay, so first things first, we've had reports from various sources that a Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is actually internally called Crown, and that Samsung already has a few working prototypes on it. Now, in terms of the actual design, the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 featured a completely new design with curved edges and almost no bezels, essentially the same design style that was first introduced with the Galaxy S8 and the S8 Plus earlier this year, but with a few tweaks, such as a larger display, more squared-off bezels, and overall a even more subtle curvature than the S8 Plus. So the edge display wasn't as curved as before, which resulted in the Note 8 being a bit easier to hold in the hand than the S8 Plus. Now, in terms of the Note 9's design, this would be very similar to the Samsung Galaxy S9, which is going to be introduced early next year. And with the S9, since it's launching in just a few months, we've actually had quite a few leaks, quite a few design leaks, such as this one, for example, from Ghost Tech, and a few more showcasing the S9, showcasing how the S9 is going to look like, and it does seem to be very similar to the current S8 Plus's design. The only difference actually being the absence of the bottom bezel, and maybe the top bezel is a tiny bit thinner. It's a bit hard to tell from these images. But essentially, the S9 won't have any major design changes over the S8, and this is most likely going to be the case with the Note 9 later on next year. So an S9 style design with no bottom bezel and possibly a thinner top bezel and the glass on the back, same curved edges. So yeah, a design really similar to the Note 8, but essentially with no bottom bezel. Now, Patently Mobile, they actually posted an image of a very interesting device from Samsung, a device that's extremely thin and only has a thick section, which is the holder for an S Pen, apparently. So this is definitely a patent for a future Galaxy Note device. Now, whether this is for the Note 9 or not, we don't know. I would say that such a thin device isn't something that Samsung might do anytime soon, especially since the Note lineup, it does come with the largest display on a Samsung phone, which in return consumes a huge amount of power to obviously power that display. So you need a fairly large battery for that. But I mean, at some point we will be seeing a dramatically redesigned Galaxy Note. I've actually made a separate video on the Samsung Galaxy Note X. If you want to know more about that, definitely check it out. But for now, this is how the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is more than likely going to look like. Now, moving on to section number 2, we have the display. So in terms of the display size, this will depend obviously on the actual design, but it's more than likely going to remain the same at 6.3 inches. Now, in terms of the resolution, we essentially have two options. So either the same 2960 by 1440p display, this will actually translate to a PPI of 521, or the second option is something that I've been personally waiting for years, and that's a 4K display. Okay, so some of you might be wondering now, why on earth would you actually need a 4K display on a smartphone? Because, you know, even a good 1080p display, RGB is pretty good enough and you won't be able to see any pixels from the average viewing distance. Well, my answer to that is VR. Samsung has the best mobile VR at the moment with their Galaxy Gear, and they actually have the biggest app selection. They also have the most fluid experience, the best VR headset design overall, and many advantages. The only issue would be the resolution, since it's actually based on the resolution of your smartphone, and not even Quad HD Plus, such as like you have on the S8 and the S8 Plus, is enough, since you can literally count the number of pixels with the naked eye. That's how huge they actually are. So the fix for this would be a 4K display, which would improve the 4K experience, the resolution at least, by a factor of 2x, essentially. Now, the Snapdragon 835 and the Exynos 8895, these are the processors that you get in the S8 and the Note 8. They already support 4K displays at 60 Hz, but for some reason, possibly battery life and cost, I'm guessing, Samsung never included a 4K display in those smartphones. Now, moving on to the camera, the Note 8 was Samsung's first smartphone to come with a dual camera module, but overall Samsung actually used the exact same sensor with the exact same specs as the one on the S8 and the S8 Plus. The only difference being a slightly tweaked image processing, which they could have updated on the S8, but they never done that. And on the Note 9, Samsung's most likely going to retain the same dual camera module system as on the Note 8. However, they might do one major change. So if you take a look at the Google Pixel 2 and the Pixel 2 XL, if you take a look at that camera, it only has a single module, but it can actually do portrait mode without having a second camera module. So the way it works is that the sensor actually has 2 layers of pixels, which it uses for extremely fast autofocusing. It essentially uses the difference in distance between each pixel to measure depth. Each pixel between the two sensors to measure depth, and it actually works really, really well. So Samsung could apply the same logic to their Note 9. And by the way, funny thing is, Samsung already uses that dual pixel technology. They've been actually using it ever since the S7 Edge. But they still use the second camera module on the Note 8 for the depth effect. So using the dual pixels would allow Samsung to either improve the portrait mode effect on the Note 9 by a lot, or they could just use the second camera module for something else. So for example, they could switch to wide-angle shots, or they could also switch to an RGB and a monochrome sensor, similar to what Huawei and the Essential phone have done. And another big improvement when it comes to the camera is going to be 4K 60 video. So finally, we've actually seen this first on the iPhone X. And even though the iPhone 8 actually, even though the Exynos 8095 does support 4K video recording at 60 frames per second, by the way, it was never enabled on the S8 and the Note 8. So this is a feature that's definitely coming alongside what could be a 1000 frames per second slow motion option. So Sony already has an almost 1000 frames per second slow motion option, actually 960 FPS in their Xperia XZ Premium phones. And we've also seen reports that Samsung will be adding this to their S9 and then the Note 9 after. Obviously not the Sony sensor, this would be a Samsung developed sensor, but capable of doing 1000 frames per second slow motion, which would be pretty nice to have. Now in terms of the actual camera specs, the aperture is going to be increased. So at the moment we have f1.7 aperture, which according to the latest reports, this might be increased to an f1.5 aperture, which would make the Note 9 and the S9's camera even better in low light. And keep in mind that the S8 and the Note 8 are already one of the best smartphones for low light photography. So yeah, an improvement in low light is definitely going to be welcomed. So improved low light, improved 4K 60 video, improved portrait mode, and that 1000 frames per second slow motion. Sounds pretty good so far. But what about the front-facing camera? Well, on the Note 8, we currently have an 8 megapixel sensor with an f1.7 aperture and Quad HD video recording. And what might be improved here is the actual resolution. So this is most likely going to be bumped to either 12 megapixels or even 16 megapixels to compete with phones such as the OnePlus 5T or other Chinese brands that actually feature 16 megapixels or even 20 megapixels or even more on the front. But keep in mind that obviously the more megapixels you add, the worse the camera is going to be in low light, unless you obviously increase the sensor size, the actual sensor size, which most manufacturers don't do. Now moving on to the specs, these are actually confirmed. So we're going to get the Snapdragon 845 on the US variants of the Note 9 and the Exynos 9810 on the international models. Both support 4K 60 video, both actually have a neural engine built in, so similar to what Apple did with the Apple 11 processor, and they both come with 4 high-performance cores and 4 low-performance cores, 2.8 GHz high performance and 1.8 GHz low performance on the Snapdragon side, and we don't actually have the actual numbers on the Exynos 9810 yet. But do expect very similar performance. Now, as usual, the Exynos is going to be a slightly better choice as it's designed and manufactured by Samsung for Samsung, but overall they would be very similar. Now in terms of the RAM, the Note 8 comes with 6 GB of RAM, which is pretty cool, but we have some phones like the OnePlus 5T and again other smartphones from the Asian markets that actually come with 8 GB of RAM. So yes, on top of that, TouchWiz and Grace UX, essentially this is how it's called now, it's pretty laggy and glitchy on the S8. Essentially, the S8 comes with 4 GB of RAM, and since you have so many background running tasks, such as Bixby, the Edge panel, and tons of Samsung bloatware running in the background at all the time, unfortunately, the performance is, again, laggy and it's pretty glitchy. So that's why we need more gigabytes of RAM, more RAM in Samsung phones, rather than something like a OnePlus 5T. So hopefully 8 GB of RAM is going to be the case because we definitely need that. Now moving on to the special features, the most expected one And the one that's being talked the most is going to be, of course, the 3D depth sensing camera. So similar to what Apple did, to what Apple uses on the iPhone 10. Now, Samsung has yet to develop their own tech for that, but most reports are saying that a fingerprint reader on their display panel is no longer an option, and that Samsung will be instead relying on facial recognition entirely. So at the moment on the Note 8, we have the iris scanner, and we also have Face Unlock, which, by the way, can be tricked with a photo or a video, by the way. So it's not really that secure. So Samsung, even if they don't add a 3D depth sensing camera, they might improve, essentially they might combine Face Unlock and the iris scanner into one and basically improve the security of that. Now, when it comes to the fingerprint scanner position, this is still going to be on the back, but this time right in the middle. So this is actually going to be fixed with the S9 earlier next year, by the way, and obviously this will move on the Note 9 as well. But other than that, some other expected new features would be an improved S Pen with even lower latency. And speaking of that, a faster refresh rate display is also a very strong possibility. So Apple has done that with the 120 Hz panel on the iPad Pro's 2017 models. And when using that with the Apple Pencil, everything feels so smooth. We also have a 120 Hz panel on the Razer phone. And yes, that would actually make a lot of sense on a device such as a Galaxy Note, since you have the S Pen. However, if this is actually happening, there's no way we'll get a 4K display as well. Other than that, even faster charging is supported by the Snapdragon 845, by the way. So up to 50% in just 15 minutes, which is crazy. But again, we don't know if the Exynos 9810 supports that or anything similar. And if it doesn't, most likely it doesn't, unfortunately we won't have that really fast charging on either of the international or the US models. Now, the speaker is rumored to be getting better since the single speaker on the S8 is currently horrible. So same goes for the Note 8 one, they're pretty bad. So dual stereo speakers might be added by turning the earpiece into a dedicated speaker, similar to what Apple did with the iPhone 7. And then finally, we've heard reports that Samsung might be removing the headphone jack from the S9. Now, I personally don't believe that this is actually the case. Samsung would want to stay ahead, so to say, of Apple and Google by offering that extra option, because Google has also removed the headphone jack from the Pixel 2. So I don't think they'll remove it from the S9 personally. But yes, this might be a possibility with the Note 9, presuming that they also release some amazing AirPod-like headphones by then. Now, moving on to the storage options, we've actually heard some reports that Samsung might be removing the micro SD card support from the Note 9 and the S9 possibly as well. Wait, what? Why would they do such a thing? Well, I actually have 3 reasons why I personally think that they might do such a thing. So number 1 is the fact that it actually takes up quite a bit of space inside the phone, and then it obviously costs Samsung quite a bit to add that in the first place. The number 2, this is the biggest one. So the external storage will always be slower than the internal one. And of course that it actually depends on the SD card that you use. But even for a top-of-the-line one, which is around 100 megabytes per second read, even that's pretty much nothing when compared to the 700 plus megabytes per second that you're getting with the S8 and the Note 8's internal storage. And obviously, most people just buy cheap SD cards that have like 20 to 40 megabytes per second. And then my reason number 3 is the fact that 64 gigabytes, which is essentially the baseline now, is way more than most people need, especially since everything is moving towards cloud storage now. And if this is the case and the microSD card support is removed, in that case, we'll most likely see 64 gigabytes and 128 gigabytes as the only storage options. Now, when it comes to the release date, that's most likely going to be August 2018. We don't actually have a specific date, but it's most likely going to be around August 2018, similar to the previous Note releases. Now, I would really wish that Samsung releases both the S9 and the Note 9 at the same time, like Apple does, like Google does, like pretty much everyone else does. That would be the perfect scenario. And how much is this thing going to cost? Well, reports are saying that this is going to be at least as expensive as the Note 9, if not more expensive. So the baseline should be up to $1,000 or £1,000 exactly in the UK. So yeah, this is not going to be a cheap phone, unfortunately. But yeah, there you go, my full Leaks and Rumors breakdown of the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. Feel free to subscribe for more Leaks and Rumors episodes like this one, and also enable notifications by tapping on that bell icon so that you get notified whenever a brand new, cool, epic tech video comes out. Also let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about the Note 9? What do you want to see personally in the Note 9? Do you think it's worth it over the S9, mainly for the S Pen, or do you think it's not? So let me know in the comments what you guys think. This has been pretty much it. Feel free to give it a like if you've enjoyed it, let me know. And yeah, see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.